Popular arcade games that were ported to consoles were often seen as a good way to gain access to play some of your most iconic moments in your home, as not everybody had access to an arcade machine, and even more so as time went on. The arcade scene started to decline somewhat, so playing games on consoles were the only other alternative. Sega would be the dominant force in the 80s and 90s with the likes of arcade machines, and even with other companies such as Konami throwing their hat into the ring to produce some memorable titles. But when you had a good formula for a game, it was always inevitable that somewhere along the line companies were going to try and capitalise on that trend and try to copy, if you will, those elements to try and cash in and make a buck off of those trends. And many of them would also use household names that would be taken from iconic TV shows and popular characters from that time as well. And when we look at the Simpsons Road Rage, that was released on a multitude of different consoles in 2001 with the PlayStation 2, Xbox, Nintendo GameCube, and even later on the Game Boy Advance. When you begin to play it for the first time, straight away it screams Crazy Taxi, pretty much down to everything bar the visuals and just the environments that you're in, but the gameplay elements, the characteristics, everything is almost identical in many respects to it. So much so that there was a lawsuit against the developers and the companies associated with creating the game, with Sega going head to head in a lawsuit stating that the game was acting on an infringement because it literally copies everything, which ideally it does, but they managed to settle the dispute outside for an undisclosed sum. But even with that, the Simpsons Road Rage is not the worst title in the world. If you've played Crazy Taxi, you will be familiar with this. If anything, you might get some enjoyment out of it, but it's not as good as Crazy Taxi. It does have some inherent flaws and gripes, and is not as well polished. And with many of these elements in mind, the game still received mixed to average reviews across all of the consoles it was released on. But in saying that, regardless of all of the negative elements that surrounded the game still sold in crazy high numbers for its time, being one of the most highly grossing games financially for the PlayStation 2 in its history. And a lot of it had to do with the Simpsons name being tied to the game, as it was in many regards probably the perfect alternative to Crazy Taxi for people that didn't have access to the Dreamcast, although Crazy Taxi would be later added to the PlayStation 2 anyway. But the Simpsons Road Rage gave you that formula and then some for fans to play something that they were familiar with, but the appeal was really with the characters from the iconic TV series, so that was enough to draw people in fairness to it. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that it is a bare bones Crazy Taxi clone. However, the Simpsons series would see better improvements with the later and spiritual successor to the game, with the Simpsons Hit and Run, which was released in 2003, which for me is one of the best games I think on the PlayStation 2. If you like fast-paced, frantic gameplay with missions that has racing elements and even feels and acts even like a Grand Theft Auto clone, it's definitely one of the better titles out there. So much so that the game goes for insane prices today on the second-hand market. If you can get a copy of that game cheap, you're doing well, as it's no easy feat. And now I had that game back in the day and I absolutely loved it, and I still go back to play it every so often as it's just so much fun. It really is a cool game, and it's one of those games that I would love to see ported to newer consoles if it was possible. We probably might never see it, but then again, you never know. Hopefully one day we will, but I can't say the same for the Simpsons Road Rage. Yes, it's okay to play in short bursts. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a crap game or it's the worst game ever, but it's not the best game on the system. It's far from it. Crazy Taxi is a better game, hands down. I have covered the PlayStation 2 port of Crazy Taxi already on the channel way back. I'll leave a link down in the description so that you can check it out. But this game does appeal to people that like to play games in short bursts or in small time frames, but that's not to say that it's easy. The difficulty quickly increases the more time you put into it, because the time frames for missions and when you collect people to take them to different points drastically decreases to a point that in many cases it's almost impossible. Even if you're just driving in the street, you might only get maybe 5 or 10 seconds to reach your destination, which is not enough time to do so. So there's a lot of gripes around some of the gameplay mechanics and certain elements around it, which obviously leads to the game getting poor reviews anyway. At least with Crazy Taxi, it was a lot more balanced and was more approachable in that respect. This game definitely doesn't capitalise on that. But regardless, there are many Simpsons games that were out there that were released on a multitude of different systems over the years. This is just but one of them. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. But if you're a fan of Crazy Taxi, I would love to know what your thoughts are of this version of the game, and what did you think of it overall? Did you like the comparisons between the two games, or maybe not so much? Or what did you think of the title overall. So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around more obscure racers like this that were also released on the PlayStation 2, then you can leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and you can also check out the playlist on screen to see a lot more videos that I have covered previously on the channel so that you can see them in action. And I will see you all in the next one.